Thank you. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Any better?
What?
No? Can I ask our sound engineers to help with the sound?
Hello?
Okay, I'm trying with this mic. Is this any better? No. Hello, is this any better? Nope. I hope everybody's in good voice today then. I think we need some help with the microphones. Okay, while our colleagues are fixing the microphones, I will do my best throw your voice impression and welcome you all to the EIB offices. Can you hear me? Good. Okay, so very, very pleased to have you here today on this beautiful Belgian summer day. And we're here really to examine in more detail how can Belgium benefit from InvestEU. Now, as most of you hopefully in this room know, InvestEU is a flagship EU initiative which is providing finance and advisory services to both the public and the private sector to boost sustainable investments, innovation, social inclusion and job creation. And obviously they were top items when this was designed, and I think in the current climate, post-pandemic and with the situation in Ukraine, they become even more important. So today we're absolutely delighted to welcome to the EIB office a very diverse range of people from Belgian counterparts. We have private sector companies, we have financial intermediaries, we have public organisations and bodies from across the country, as well as representatives of the government. And as you know, InvestEU is a partnership between the European Commission and the EIB. We're key leads on this. So I would like now to hand over to Stefan de Rink, who is the head of the European Commission representation to Belgium, to give us a few opening words. Stefan, and I think the mic is now working. Excellent.
Well, thank you for warming up the microphone. That's great. And as a Belgian citizen, I should start by saying that we had lots of nice summer days. And they will come back. We will have more of them, just like we will have more investment in the EU over the years to come. Welcome to the InvestEU Roadshow. And thank you to our colleagues from the European Investment Bank, Vice President Peeters, who's online, whom I wish a speedy recovery, and Elena Flores from the Deputy Director General from our DG Economic and Financial Affairs. I'll just say a very few words of welcome. And maybe take some distance as well from the microphone. And just to frame this afternoon's event, and as you already said by way of introduction, we have that experience as a representation of the European Commission in Belgium. It's when we organize events, or when we support the organization of events, we get Belgian stakeholders, which we have a lot of them here in the room, advisors to ministers for budget and other issues. We have a number of promotional banks, public banks, private banks, also companies who are interested in hearing about investment opportunities, as well as, no doubt, access to finance for smaller and medium-sized companies. But we also have a number of European stakeholders who join us always in this Brussels bubble. And so everybody is, of course, very, very welcome today in the context of the InvestEU Roadshow, which follows an agreement between the European Commission, the EIB, and the European Investment Fund, whereby we leverage basically the EU budget and guarantee with the EU budget additional investments to the European economy. There are various instruments, of course, at EU level, and I will not go into any great detail here, but I should mention on the public investment side, of course, the Recovery and Resilience Plan. And because what we are trying to do also with InvestEU serves similar objectives of accelerating the green and digital transition. And the Belgian Recovery and Resilience Plan has overshot the Commission's EU targets in terms of green and digital investment by a wide margin in terms of its emphasis. The Belgian plan is really about green and about digital. And if you haven't discovered yet the Next Generation Belgium website, which our colleagues in the federal government are managing, it's a very good website where you can track progress on the green, on the digital transition that the RRP is supporting, but also on all the other aspects of the recovery plan. Today is, of course, also about leveraging the budget for private investment. So I wish all of you a very constructive workshop, and I hope you will find opportunities for long-term investments, for access to finance for smaller companies, for EIB-supported projects and EIF-supported projects. And with that, I'll pass the floor back to you. I thank you very much for coming here today and for your interest in InvestEU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. And I'm Irish, so I know about summer days. I'm now very pleased to hand the floor virtually over to EIB Vice President Kris Peeters. I don't really need to introduce him to this audience of Belgians here today as your former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Economy and Employment. And he joined EIB in January 2021 as Vice President for the Benelux constituency, where he has lead responsibility for mobility, transport, security and defence, and he's also heavily involved in supporting science, education, digital economy and SMEs, all very relevant for today's conversation. Now, he is very, very keen to promote InvestEU. He's not so keen to promote the coronavirus, and as he tested positive, this is why he's joining us virtually rather than in person. So I see his name there, I see his picture. I'm hoping it can be a little bit larger than what I see on the screen there. But Vice President Peeters, can I hand the floor to you, please?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, also Madam Flores, and I hope that also the Minister is coming, here, Vincent. Unfortunately, it's not possible for me to be there in the meeting room, but it's still for me a great pleasure to open on behalf of the EIB Group today's InvestEU Roadshow event. Joining the stage with Elena, Flores is yet another sign of the great cooperation between the European Commission and the EIB Group as the main implementing partner of the InvestEU program. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are facing more unprecedented challenges which nobody could have even imagined when InvestEU was conceived. We are just exiting the COVID pandemic, with on our economies, but also really impact on our life in many different ways, and I can testimony for that. And at the same time, the recovery be our main focus. We are facing dark times with the Russian invasion and the terrible destruction inflicted on Ukraine and its people has led to the largest flow of refugees experienced in Europe since the Second World War. This war will also have an economic impact, not only in Europe, but on a global scale, impacting sectors ranging from energy supply to food production and jeopardizing the recovery. And also questioned more deeply the European sovereignty and the strategic autonomy, notably in terms of energy security and defense. However, ladies and gentlemen, this cannot mean that we turn our back on the urgent challenge of climate change. On the contrary, scaling up our investment in renewables, energy efficiency, and new green technologies will help us achieve two goals: tackling the climate crisis, of course, and secondly, making our energy system independent from Russian imports. In the face of all these challenges, we stick to the long-term goal of making European economies more resilient, more autonomous, and more competitive in a global environment, and at the same time, more cohesive, equal, and inclusive. This is why a strong European response is needed again, and thanks to our unity of purpose, we have the chance to give a pan-European response to challenges that are too big to be solved only with a national or local approach. And thanks to InvestEU, we have the chance to be able to mobilize significant funds for investments in sectors and industries that create jobs and make the world a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, we at the EIB are proud to be part of this European response. And we believe that our unique position offers opportunities to address this crisis because of our financial firepower, because of our experience and expertise, but also because we are the bank of the European Union. Last year, and that is very important for Belgium, I think we provided 3.4 billion euros of financing to Belgium. And I can give you some examples of companies, small companies, very important in the Belgium medtech, for example, is Star Medical, a very important company that developed a novel implant for patients suffering from glaucoma. Another example that I can give you in the other sector and a big company is ArcelorMittal Belgium. There we also invested in the decarbonization technology that saves CO2 emissions and turn them into useful biofuel. Two examples, and I can give you a lot of others also when you look to the wind turbines and so on. And the EU bank is willing to do more, especially to address the crucial short and medium-term issues raised by the war in Ukraine, such as energy security, the need for social infrastructure to handle the influx of refugees and the impact of crisis on businesses and particularly the small and medium-sized companies. Ladies and gentlemen, InvestEU program will be a decisive tool to boost investments in many critical areas. It builds on the successful model of the investment plan for Europe, designed to answer the global finance crisis and implemented by the EIB. It will bring together under one roof the European Fund for Strategic Investments and 13 other EU financial instruments such as COSME and InnoFin. InvestEU makes EU funding simpler to access and more effective. Thanks to the guarantee provided by the European budget, it intends to support public and private investment in key EU policy priorities along for 4 policy windows, which are very much aligned with EIB Group public priority goals. It also has a strong climate focus for the entire InvestEU. At least 30% of the investments will go towards climate change mitigation and adaptation. InvestEU continues to well-established and successful partnership with the EIB Group. We will implement 75% of the EU budget guarantee and advisory budget under InvestEU. InvestEU will focus on operations with a higher risk profile compared to average EIB business and on projects that would be hard to complete within a short time frame or to the same extent without its support. InvestEU will notably allow the EIB Group to finance more innovative projects. This will enable the EIB to address market gaps and reduce the risk for third-party investors, private and public, unlocking investment which is currently slowed down or hindered by economic uncertainty. Another key figure of InvestEU is the InvestEU Advisory Hub. Building on the success of the European Investment Advisory Hub and other joint advisory programs, the EIB and the European Commission will cooperate to provide technical, financial, and strategic advisory support to public and private projects, promoters, regional and national authorities, and financial institutions under the InvestEU Advisory Hub. Following the signature of the InvestEU guarantee agreement between the European Commission and the EIB in March this year, the InvestEU Investment Committee has already confirmed on the 1st April the EU guarantee for EIB financing total of 1.9 billion euros, investments to be backed with support, clean energy, education, improved internet connection, water and wastewater infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, this afternoon you will be hearing much more on how the EIB Group is going to deploy InvestEU through various types of products, from direct loans to corporates up to equity investments in funds. InvestEU is a perfect instrument to match national investment programs with EU policies and vice versa, and ensure Europe remains an attractive place for businesses to settle and to drive. And I look forward to continuing for an excellent cooperation with Belgium in this respect. And I wish you, of course, a fruitful and pleasant afternoon. Thank you very much.
Is an example of a superb partnership between the bank and the European Commission. So we're very pleased to have here today with us Elena Flores, who's the Deputy DG at DG ECFIN. She has many, many responsibilities, one of which is as the EC rep on the EIB Board of Directors. But today she's here because she's also responsible for InvestEU. Elena, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Peeters, for your intervention. I think that you said it all. So I can be really brief. And that shows precisely the good cooperation between the EIB and the Commission. This is really a joint project, InvestEU, and it is a project that doesn't start from scratch. As you know, this is a project that builds on the experience with EFSI. Extremely good experience, extremely efficient, and we want to do it better. And what is, I think, interesting to point, in addition to what Mr. Peeters already said, is that obviously the context is different, and it's true that when we started InvestEU, we were not thinking about the current context. But what we knew already was that the huge investment needs in Europe, if we want to be successful on the two transitions, digital and green. So that we knew when we launched the project, but now we know how much more important those transitions are now that we are living through the effects of the war in Ukraine, which is obviously in terms of, from a macroeconomist point of view, it's very challenging in terms of policy mix, fiscal, monetary, because the inflation impact, but it is also very challenging because the need to become less dependent from fossil fuels is even stronger. So clearly the position that the Commission has taken is that, if anything, we have to go quicker in our climate transition ambitions. And here clearly the role of InvestEU is very critical. And I would also say that InvestEU is not to be seen like a completely independent, alone instrument. InvestEU is part of the EU policy response precisely to address these transition challenges. And as already has been said today, it goes together with the recovery and resilience facilities, which means that what we want to do is to use these instruments in a way that they reinforce each other, so that there will be a number of investments that will be financed through the RRF, and there will be a number of other investments that will be financed with InvestEU. And what is the difference? Well, clearly the main difference is that InvestEU is there to leverage private investment. And that is where the complementarity really will play a role, mobilizing as much as possible the public resources in order to leverage the private investment that is needed for the transition, because clearly the public alone cannot make it. And in that sense, InvestEU focuses on these 4 windows that have already been mentioned, and we really want to use the windows in a very strategic manner, and to really go on the investments where it is more difficult, I would say. You can translate that into higher risk or more innovative, etc. Sorry, yes, so I have to speak loudly because the mic doesn't work. Now it works, okay. Thank you very much, that was very timely, thanks. So just to repeat the last sentence clearly, what is important is to mobilize the private sector thanks to the EU budget guarantees to investments that otherwise would not happen because too innovative, too risky, still uncertain in areas where we have less expertise or less accumulated expertise. And that goes across the 4 windows. But I think clearly the innovation, and maybe I would mention the social window as well, which is quite a new target. And in the current context of addressing the implications of the refugees coming to, in particular, to a number of European countries, I think that window can play a very important role in addressing investments that are going to be needed. So that's in broad terms. Then more specifically, I think that what is new in this InvestEU approach is that it brings together a number of programs that were scattered around in different parts of the EU budget, etc. And obviously, we want to be more efficient, to minimize overlaps, and to secure synergies using these various possibilities. So this centralized approach in mobilizing the capital is very important. Obviously, our major partner is the EIB Group with 75% of the implementation, but also the novelty here is that it is open to other partners, and in particular to national implementing partners. And here in Belgium, we have the PMV, who is very active and will be one of our implementing partners. And the purpose here is, in particular, to use this leverage to reach in a much targeted manner the local needs, because those implementing partners have a stronger knowledge and are more anchored on the local. So in that way, we link the competencies of the EIB, which are great, together with the local anchoring of those other implementing partners. So we are very hopeful that this will really make also a difference. Now, maybe just to mention another interesting element is that there is also a possibility to ensure synergies between InvestEU and RRF through the member states' compartment in the RRF. This is a possibility that some countries have already started to use, others not yet. Belgium, for instance, not yet, but maybe that's also something to be considered. It could be interesting. So I think that brings to the end of my introduction, because colleagues here from my team and also from the EIB team will present in more detail the InvestEU program and how it will function. But I'm really glad to say also to end my remarks that it is not only a project, now it is working. And as Mr. Peeters said, already the investment committee has approved a number of projects. And we are going to negotiate with the remaining implementing partners in a speedy manner, because we are quite pressed by the time if we want to use all the resources available. So we count on all of you to make a success out of this. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much to Elena, Flores, and also to Kris Peeters for opening this. And I think some of the key messages coming is that InvestEU is needed more than ever now. Emphasizing innovation, but also the social window, and to have ecological, inclusive and cohesive growth. And also the fact that it's coordinating or bringing together so many other instruments that maybe were a bit more fragmented in the past. But also, Elena, you want to encourage countries to look at the potential to have synergies with the RRF, I think was a key message coming from you. We're now going to move to the more gory details, so to speak, of InvestEU. And we're very pleased to have colleagues from DG ECFIN, from Elena's team, here to give us an overview of the InvestEU program. I'm going to give the floor to Janka Peteghem, please. And just to let you know, press it hard, it will work.
Thank you. All right. Didn't need to press so hard. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today. And I think I can truly say the speakers before me did say it almost all, but I do have a little bit more detail and maybe a bit more visual aid. So let's start. I'm very happy to be here also because for me personally, this has been a program that I have been following since really its inception. I was in the room when we were discussing, the very first details about how to structure this program with the 4 windows that have been mentioned before. And it was all very exciting. And this was, I think, back in 2017. So quite some time ago, and a lot have happened since then, as Elena also said. And we have been able to really sort of work with it and design the program in such a way that it's very, very relevant for addressing the challenges of today. But first, let me maybe start with a little bit of a sort of a look into the past. So as you know, the program builds on the success of previous financial instruments and EU budgetary guarantee instrument, notably the European Fund for Strategic Investments under the Investment Plan for Europe, the Juncker Plan. And as you can see, we have been pretty successful with the FC, with mobilizing investments of almost 550 billion euros over the years, practically 5 years that it has been up and running. And so you will see the figures here as of end 2020 for the whole of the EU. 733 infrastructure projects, almost 1.5 billion SMEs benefited from beneficial access to financing under the FC. So we are very, very happy with that, and we hope to continue in that vein. Also in Belgium, voila, we did have some very good results under the FC. With total financing under FC from the EIB Group amounting to 2 billion euros, mobilizing around 11 billion euros. So those are very, very big figures. And both under the infrastructure and innovation window and the so-called SME window under the FC. So we had these 2 windows at the time. This is why we also report on it in this way. With 24 approved projects under the infrastructure and innovation window in Belgium, and around 400 million euro in total financing in order to support SMEs. You see the Tram de Liège sort of picture. I think it's a relatively well-known and famous project, FC project in Belgium. I'm pretty sure that there are some of you here in the room who have worked on it or at least heard of it in some way or form, where the EIB provided around 200 million financing backed by FC in order to design and construct this tram line in the city of Liège, which should help with the mobility, sort of climate-related things, and in general, sort of well-being of the city of Liège. So building on all of this, we would like to now smoothly transition into the InvestEU program, which, as has already been said before, has pulled under one roof around 14 financial instruments that we had previously, including the FC, has taken over the FC principle of EU budgetary guarantee, and also these 3 elements, which you can see, the InvestEU fund, the InvestEU advisory hub, and the InvestEU portal, which builds on the European Investment Project portal from the Juncker Plan. The InvestEU fund is, of course, the main biggest element. It's our single fund, which brings together all the previous instruments we had at EU level. We have a 26 billion euro budgetary guarantee that should allow for the mobilization of around 370 billion euro overall, by, as has been said before, attracting other investments, public, but also very importantly private. As has already been said as well, our partners will be not only the EIB Group, which is our traditional partner for the implementation of EU-level financial instruments, but also other international financial institutions and national promotional banks, such as PMV here in Belgium. It's important in our governance structure that an independent investment committee approves the use of the guarantee for the project submitted by implementing partners. So it's neither the Commission nor the EIB, EIF, or other implementing partners who are deciding ultimately on the use of the EU guarantee, which de-risks these investments, but it is an investment committee composed of independent experts, and also each policy window, which I will just show you in a minute, has their own configuration with experts who are experts in those kind of in investments in those sectors. We've had more than 20 projects approved by the investment committee so far. These are, for the moment, projects coming from the EIB Group, EIB and EIF, as we have already signed the guarantee agreement with them. These are the famous policy windows. We have already mentioned them multiple times, but it never hurts to have them on the screen as well, with the budgetary allocation that have been in the end allocated per window in the InvestEU regulation. So you see the sustainable infrastructure window has the highest allocation. This is also because it will be very important to help support the objectives of the European Green Deal, the green transition, which is of course one of the biggest challenges that we are facing at the moment. So this is also why, but of course very important also the research, innovation and digitization window, the SME window, and the social window. Even though it looks like it has a smaller allocation than it does, this is already a huge leap compared to what we had before. And it's really, as Elena said, something that we are proud of. It's to have brought forward an actual window for social investments, because we are talking here about repayable form of finance. So of course, for social investment, it's, there is always also a very significant part that will have to be financed through grants, but we are entering and trying to develop this new territory, the social investment ecosystem in Europe through the social window. And we are looking forward to seeing how that will go. We have the possibility for member states to allocate part of their structural funds allocation or RRF allocation to InvestEU through the so-called member state compartment. It has already been mentioned before as well. As you can see on the screen, there are some member states which have already expressed interest in setting up these member state compartments. We think it's a very good way to really look holistically, as Elena mentioned, at the needs, the investment needs in a country, and really try to look for synergies between financial instruments that may be implemented at national level, either from structural funds or national resources. And then on the other side, investments from the InvestEU EU compartment. So really what is available through the different implementing partners, and maybe also looking at the history of their investments in that country, and perhaps really looking at what could be how all of these different types of financial instruments could be complemented via a dedicated product under the member state compartment, or via topping up products of existing products of implementing partners, where the member state might want to see more of that or part of that product, focusing on a certain policy in their territory. So of course, all the investments that would come from such a product under the member state compartment would be ring-fenced to the member state, or even a particular region of that member state that is possible. This is just a sketch showing how it will work in practice and how it is working in practice already. You see the implementing partners. So there is the EIB and EIF, which will implement 75% of the guarantee, of the EU compartment guarantee, at least, and then other implementing partners. We have different types of financial products that they will implement, either directly or via financial intermediaries, which could be banks or VC funds. So really depending on the product. The direct loans go only from the EIB, but it doesn't mean that other implementing partners won't be able to implement this kind of product. It's just a visual representation. And you will also see the member state compartment, where on the bottom you see the financial instruments implemented by the member state, potentially under shared management, and then the possibility to transfer up to 5% to the member state compartment. However, the 5% would have to be in case the member state decides, both in the partnership agreement and then later on through an amendment to their operational program. In case that hasn't been decided at the level of the partnership agreement with the Commission, there is still possibility as of January 2023, but it will be a little bit less than the full sum allowed, which is the 5% from each program. You will see the beneficiaries. They always have to be, compliant with the types of beneficiaries that are eligible under the 4 policy windows, as per the InvestEU regulation, InvestEU investment guidelines, and ultimately the guarantee agreement terms and conditions that we have agreed with the implementing partners based on those documents. The second very important pillar or element is the InvestEU Advisory Hub. It is also already sort of open for business, and it's implemented by EIB and EIB Group and other advisory partners, also along the 4 policy windows. And as you will see, there is also a cross-sectoral advisory support window where the CR left somewhere on holidays. But anyway, here we have really priorities which are cross-sectoral that we want to support, such as just transition, but also gender smart financing and others. The advisory hub will be providing project advisory, so to build up the project pipeline, also for subsequent financing under the InvestEU fund, but not necessarily. Capacity building, for instance, the financial intermediaries that would implement products in an intermediated manner, so that they are better able and better equipped to, for instance, look for and work with beneficiaries under certain products, for instance, creative and cultural sector, or SMEs active in the sustainability space, or social, because sometimes it's not that evident from the day-to-day work of the intermediaries how to look for the elements that we would require in order for them to get the support of the EU guarantee. So we want to provide capacity building for that, to help you and to help our intermediaries build up their project pipeline, look for the right sort of companies to build up their portfolios to match the policy priorities we want to support. And also in general, market development, including market studies, are being done by the advisory hub. So here you can see also the link to the so-called wizard. We call it the wizard. It's a very fun tool. You can click on that and as if you were a project promoter, and go one by one replying to questions, which in the end should sort of give you a reply as to which advisory partner with their respective advisory initiatives would be best placed to support your particular needs. So the central entry point is basically this link. It's on our website, and you will see that the advisory hub, just as the fund, is should provide also a smooth transition from the previous advisory initiatives under the Juncker plan, but also others, such as, for instance, Elena or Jaspers, as you can see on the screen. And finally, as the third element under the InvestEU program, we have the InvestEU portal, which, as it says very nicely, is bringing together project promoters with investors. So it's a visibility platform on the Commission website, where project promoters can submit projects, which then appear in the database, which is being checked by investors who might want to sort of consider them for financing. You can then search on the portal according to country or according to type of company or sector. So it's relatively easy to navigate, and we encourage you to make use of it, whether you're on one or the other side. Here we have a few success stories from the portal. So companies which have received investments after appearing on the website, on the InvestEU portal. Bioelectronic device, which stimulates the peripheral nervous system to address many of the world's most pressing healthcare needs. So that sounds very good to me. But unfortunately, I won't be able to tell you much more about it. And a platform that simplifies or accelerates logistic company using blockchain technologies. So these are the kind of also companies that you could find there, and which could receive financing thanks to appearing on the portal. It is for free, so I encourage you to have a look at that. That will be it from me. I don't think we have much more time, but in case you have any questions, feel free to approach me during one of the coffee breaks or at the end. I'm very happy to give you more details or, any sort of inside info from negotiations, if I can, if you're interested in that. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Janka. That was a really good overview of the InvestEU and the different pillars that it contains. And I think the most important thing is the website address, which will lead everyone to the pieces of information. Now going to ask some of my colleagues from sunny Luxembourg who've come up here today to come up and tell us different aspects of InvestEU that they're working on. We have Shelley Forrester, who works on the InvestEU Advisory Hub. We have Pierre-Emmanuel Noel, who's welcome back to the Brussels office, who's the representative for operations in Belgium. And we have Yu Yang, who's the head of unit for life and science biotech. I'm not going to jump up and down like a jack in the box between the three of you. So I'm going to ask you to hand over to each other. And I'm also going to ask you to be as succinct as possible. Okay, thank you. Shelley.
Thanks very much, Mary, and welcome to everyone, and thank you for taking the time to come and learn a little bit about the InvestEU program. And I'm going to speak with you today about the advisory services that are available. I hope I will be able to be succinct indeed. I have to say I've made notes because I've been involved in the advisory hub since its inception under the FC. And I'm pretty enthusiastic about what the InvestEU brings to the table, and I could probably fill the entire hour discussing everything, but I haven't got that kind of time, so let's see what I can manage. I think there are three key messages that I would like to present. First of all, the InvestEU is extremely well aligned to the EIB as the climate bank, and thus, as a 75% partner to the EC, we are expecting the advisory services will grow in importance because the challenge is to meet the climate targets and to become sustainable in our economic growth. It's very pressing and also very important and requires a transition in many, many ways. And I think that advisory services then are well positioned to play a key role, not in accelerating, but also in determining that transition. Secondly, advisory services are available for public, private, and financial institutions, as Janke has pointed out. I'm going to address public and private. The other panel will address the financial institutions, but I don't want you to forget that indeed advisory services are available. And thirdly, although our emphasis is on project development, also as mentioned previously, which leading to the financing and implementation of the needed investment, it is well understood that capacity building of project promoters, not only financial intermediaries, but both promoters and intermediaries, as well as market development, is also quite critical, especially when you're trying to build a nascent sector. That can also be quite critical. So indeed, we do cover all, but our emphasis is definitely on the project development. Now, there we are. So what's old and what's new? I guess it's understood now that the advisory hub under FC did not include InnoFin, Jaspers, Elena, but we have now come together under these new policy windows. So indeed, this means that our services are going to be complementary to each other and not additional. Under the FC, we were obliged to be additional. So if there were any of these other programs that could take things forward, we had to step back. Now we are working together in a more complementary and synergistic fashion. It's definitely an improvement. It reduces this emphasis on, well, what mandate, and it increases the emphasis on the policy priority, the common objectives, and the eligibilities. And we're very pleased about that. The delivery mode is different. It used to be that the FC Advisory Hub had the famous wizard and that we were accepting all of the requests, but that's not the case anymore. Now, the Commission, and specifically DG ECFIN, is the central entry point for the requests, and we, as 75% partner, are really more focusing on EIB's priorities and feeding EIB pipeline. It gives it more flexibility to the Commission, I must admit, also perhaps a bit more responsibility, but I do think that this model is quite good, and we welcome it, and we're looking forward to working under it. The context as well has changed. This investment plan for Europe, economic recovery from a sovereign debt crisis. It was maybe sometimes not so easy for advisory at project level to address some of the issues that maybe needed regulatory change or something like that. But indeed, under the Green Deal, Next Generation Green, Digital, Resilient Europe, we see a huge amount of opportunity for us because this is a very focused mandate, more challenging objectives where advisory, both technical and financial, can really make a difference in creating new ways of approaching the needed investment. So we're quite excited about the way that this has been structured and, as I say, quite look forward to it. Now, indeed, we are offering advisory under all the windows. The Sustainable Infra window definitely has a bit of a public sector focus. I would sort of mention in particular that there's new emphasis on environmental priorities with a big top up from the LIFE program to try and mainstream the use of nature-based solutions and natural capital. Also an emphasis on improving social outcomes. So sustainability, that notion of climate, environment, and social is really important, and it's a bit of a cross-cutting theme, definitely across all the windows. The RID and SME has been sort of combined together, and there is maybe the private sector focus, noting that often first-of-a-kind demo and pilot projects that really have a great need for access to finance are really going to be coming from here in the private sector, driving the innovation and driving the transition. So we have a big focus here, and this is basically where the INNOFIN mandate is found its new home, let's say. The social investment and skills were also, again, very much, it's true, a lot of intermediated finance available, a lot of intermediated support here, but the social infrastructure and services is very much sort of a part of what we have been doing under FC, and that we plan to continue with that. So I don't see, except for the increased importance on incorporating the financial intermediaries and sort of improving that element of advisory. I see that we have all the elements that we have had and some more. I might also mention that Elena, coming under the sustainable infra, is also just a recognition of something that always was in place with us. We've always worked closely with our Elena colleagues, always been available to do pre-Elena, but now maybe it's even going to be a little bit more closer. They look at the demand side for energy, buildings, PVs, public lighting, district heating in particular, and they've been a phenomenally successful program, I must say. Finally, the cross-sectoral window. The Circular Cities, the center, is building on things that we got started under the FC Hub, and the Circular Economy Technical Assistance Facility is a new program that we hope to get established that builds on this. This is a good example of this idea of building market development, awareness raising, capacity building, leading to project development that is so necessary in an area like this, which is a bit still a nascent sector that needs a lot of support across the full range of spectrums. The other area to point out maybe is our specific role in supporting public sector loan facility, the so-called Pillar 3 of the Just Transition. And here we have a dedicated pot of 35 million to support projects that want to combine a need for bankability purposes to combine a grant with co-financing to support the just transition. The advancing the gender issues as well, quite important for us. As I say, it cuts across all, but there is a very specific, or two very important areas. One as it relates to infrastructure design and employment, and also the support specifically to female entrepreneurs and investing in female-led businesses. And so you will see that that becomes a key role for us going forward, a key area. Whoop. Oh, I think I did that a little bit too quickly. Okay. We offer support through all the project cycle, and as I've just explained, it's all important. It's maybe especially so in climate change, where we need this innovation and of technology from the pilot phase to full deployment. We are looking at new methods of project development. We need new financial tools, new methodologies for appraising projects, for helping them to meet taxonomy and other standards. So this is all important, and we will be very active in all four of these areas. Just to maybe take a couple of minutes on advisory services for the public sector. These are the key, on the left-hand side, the key windows where we see that we will be very active. We will be providing technical assistance on the project itself, strengthening organizational capacity. That's looking at project teams and how to develop the partnership models, new delivery models. You know, this is how do we structure these things? Also to get the synergies of the private sector incorporated well into the public. One example of that is some work that EPIC has been doing in EV charging infrastructure to support new concession models for the public sector to roll out, especially when in cities, to get these charging points rolled out quickly and efficiently. Also, all these new tools and standards and eligibilities, they need to be understood and incorporated into public investment. And that's not very easy. And we are finding that we are spending a lot of time and looking at new ways of coming up with Paris alignment, technical or TA, or meeting the different reporting and monitoring standards, all this kind of thing. It's going to be a big job to meet these needs. Finally, oh gosh. Just a few examples of what we did under the FC Hub. A lot of it has had to do with climate and energy efficiency in particular. We did a project in Flanders called Falco that led to a new financial instrument to support energy efficiency, also energy efficiency for residencies in Wallonia. Again, another one that had a financial instruments focus to it. We did the safer and greener motorway lighting, where it was an efficient lighting, changing the energy efficiency of the lighting and the improvement of the lighting on the motorways. And here we provided support in particular on a PPP basis. And then for the buses, the clean buses for De Line, we also provided support to do an options analysis on different kinds of alternate fuel vehicles. And this is a really, really complicated bit of advisory, I must say. We've done 6 or 7 of these. Everyone is very, very particular. Elena as well has done a project in Leuven that was supporting public and private entities for energy efficiency in buildings, street lighting, and integrated renewable energy. They were able they funded a project development unit and consultants who provided underpinning supporting studies. They also have an ongoing project called Renault Watt in the Wallonia region, which is also intended to convert and create a more energy efficiency in 500 public buildings owned by different municipalities. Now, quickly on to the corporate sector, where really we have a very good experience through our ECFIN advisory colleagues that have now rebranded themselves as Innovation and Digital Finance Advisory. Very, very focused on project advisory support to improve bankability, to work directly with the project promoters, act as a sounding board, improving financial documentation, and really specifically focusing on getting them ready to access the finance that could be available through intermediaries or through some of our risk-sharing products with the EIB, but also more generally. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the market studies and ecosystem development, they've done a lot of work here in these nascent sectors where bankability is definitely an issue, and we need the support. So things like cybersecurity, blue economy, hydrogen, they've done a tremendous amount of work here, sometimes leading to new financial instruments, and sometimes just leading to new project structures and identifying projects that need support. I think this last slide that I have here is a nice way to introduce my colleagues. I understand that both of them have been involved in this. This is an example of a project that received advisory support from our colleagues in terms of analyzing the business plan, identifying a financial structure, introducing the company to the EIB services, and preparing the company for its project appraisal, which was a very successful one. And with that, maybe now, I think I've probably hit my time limit, and I turn it over to you, and I look forward to questions from everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, hello. Hello, everybody. I would like maybe to get to my slides, which should be fine here. Good. So thank you very much for coming. And I introduce myself briefly. I work for the lending operations at EIB in Luxembourg, and I cover Belgium. So my challenge is to try to, within 10 to 15 minutes, rather 10 than 15, try to cover 4 different areas of work. So I hope you will bear with me. I'll try to be short and to the point. So this is the overview of what I want to get through with you. I would like to first introduce you to I would call it the bread and butter of EIB, that is lending to the public sector and public infrastructure, which the bank has been doing from its very creation. Then we'll move on to project finance, then to what we do via financial institutions. You have understood that sometimes we lend through banks, commercial banks or public sector banks. And finally, we'll have a look at what we do on the corporate side when we support large or mid-cap companies in Belgium. So here we go. Let's start with the historical activity of the bank. The public sector and infrastructure lending. Well, in Belgium, I must tell you, we are very happy. We are all over the place, whether it's about water, wastewater sectors, energy, fiber, networks, in other words. We cover them pretty much all. Hospitals. Every new hospital in Belgium in the last 10 years, almost every new hospital has been co-financed by EIB. We are very glad to be a reference lender to the sector. Also, schools, university, fundamental research. We are very active too in that sector with, among others, a very large loan to the Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles for the French-speaking schools of Belgium. Sustainable transport, port, social housing, etc. In short, a very wide ranging of sectors that are well covered by the bank. These sectors in Belgium, most of the time, are public sector, right? This is a political choice. EIB is not here to lecture a country to say your water should be public or private. We look at the quality of the project, and if the project is good, we finance it irrespective of the policy environment, irrespective of the policy choices that have been made to deliver this infrastructure. So here are some pictures. It's a very little sample of what we do to show you how active we are across the pie in Belgium. So the water sector, here it's the wastewater sector, more specifically ECFIN in Flanders is a long-term beneficiary of our support. Société Publique de Gestion de l'Eau in Wallonia receives also considerable amounts from the bank. Why? Because these two entities contribute to a better environment. They treat the wastewater in the two largest regions of the country. In the middle, you can see our Vice President, Kris Peeters, shaking hands with Walloon Finance Minister Jean-Luc Cruc. That was on the occasion of the largest ever loan signed by EIB in the country, 1.1 billion euro. And that was for social housing, for bringing the social housing up to the best possible energy standards, and also to increase the resilience of the Walloon region, because you will all remember the terrible floods last year in July. And of course, in order to avoid or reduce such risk, a lot of investment need to be made to strengthen the banks of the various rivers. And part of the loan was also earmarked for that. On the top, you have one of the many hospitals. It's the closest here. It's Delta, Chirec Delta. It's a hospital that EIB co-financed, actually in the middle of the financial crisis, when the commercial banks were all, rushing for the exits because they wouldn't want to lend long-term anymore. And EIB was a bit of the white knight that really made this project possible. Also, energy networks, Ores, Fluvius, social housing in Flanders, and many, many other. I don't want to be too long on this, and I will move on to the next chapter, which is project finance. We have here Ruben de Vogelaar, who is in charge of that sector in Belgium. I would like to be short, but still I have to mention that this sector played a very important role for transition in Belgium. Why? You know that Belgium is at the forefront of offshore wind, and from the very beginning of the development of this sector in Belgium, EIB has been there to finance the very first project, and it went so well that eventually the bank remained a partner for all the following projects. So we have financed practically almost 100% of the offshore wind parks in Belgium. I think it's the only country in the EU where we have been such a structural partner. And of course, now it looks like a commoditized sector because a number of transactions have taken place. But at the beginning, you know, when the risk needed to be taken, EIB was there from the very outset. And of course, as you can imagine, EIB being a AAA bank, AAA means that you need to be prudent. Otherwise, the people from Moody's and S&P knock on the door and they say, well, you are taking too much risk with your loans. We will take 1 or 2 or 3 notches from your credit rating. So for a public sector bank, which is policy driven like EIB, the challenge is, how can I be relevant? How can I be additional and take risk while keeping the holy AAA? And there come the colleagues from the Commission. They provide this guarantee. It was called Juncker Plan in InvestEU. Now the idea remains the same. They put a guarantee in front of the riskiest business of EIB, thanks to which we can take more risk. And in the context of project finance, which was already at the very riskier end of what we do, we have now the possibility to go even further in the risk-taking. And here I give you an example. Offshore wind is fine. I would say nowadays it's pretty much known and tested and tried, but there is the new frontier, which is floating offshore wind. And as the name indicates, it's a bit less stable and it requires a bit more of a risk-taking appetite. Well, thank you, EU budget, we were able to finance in France a very innovative project in that sector that we could put under that guarantee from the European Union. And I have a couple of other examples. I will not get into the details, I'm short of time, unfortunately, but this ranges from fiber optic in Italy. By the way, we did it also in Belgium with Proximus. Flood defense in the Netherlands, solar PV in Spain, and another one that you have probably heard about, this giga factory for electric vehicle batteries in Sweden. So all of these projects are risky and we are able still to finance them. Now I will be very quick on the third chapter, which is about what we do via banks. Why? Because EIB has 2 ways of engaging with banks. Either we just lend them the money and we take no risk. We say, okay, you've got some cheap money and you can go on, keep on financing SMEs, but the risk is yours. That's one level. And then you have the second level, and that will be Paul and the colleagues from EIF. We can also say to the banks, by the way, we can remove risk from your balance sheet. And this requires a very specific expertise because risk in a portfolio of SMEs requires a sort of statistical loss analysis, and EIF have the experts for that. So what you have to take on board from this is another way for EIB to take risk is via portfolio of SME loans, and the experts are at EIF for that business. And I will wrap up with the fourth part of my and last part of my presentation, the corporate lending. Over and above the bridges and roads and the wind farms, EIB can also finance the private sector directly. And when I say the private sector, I mean either the big guys like Proximus for the fiber optic, as I mentioned before, or some smaller companies that invest in innovation. So we are not for-profit bank. We don't knock on the door to say we would like to make money by lending to you. Our loan is always subject to, for every euro that we lend, twice that amount at least invested in research and development. So it's only the innovative companies that can demonstrate they invest in RDI that can attract our financing. I'll give you some names. In Belgium, Puratos, if you eat a sandwich, maybe around the corner, you will somehow benefit from the EIB loan indirectly. Van de Wiel, Materialize, which is about 3D printing, and many, many, many more. We can also take even more risk when lending to corporates. For instance, when we lend to the ones that don't have access to cash flow yet. These are guys that already have a P&L. They make money, we know them, the credit analysis is more classic. When it comes to up-and-coming companies, which are still maybe 1 year from cash flows, biotech, etc., that's venture debt, and that will be the next presentation by my colleague who is in charge of that team. So this is not very funny. I'll skip it. So in short, indeed, when we are engaging with a mid-cap, for instance, an innovative mid-cap, they have to show us, look, this is what we're going to do in the next 3 years in terms of investment. This is our R&D salaries, R&D capex, R&D opex, and we sort of bundle these amounts together, and we can reach to up to 50% of that amount, and that will calibrate the ELB loan. Why work with EIB? Well, there would be a very trivial answer that would be we are not for profit, and therefore we are cheaper by construction, right? We don't have to pay dividends, not yet, to our shareholders, the member states of the EU. Therefore, the funding advantage that we raise from the capital markets because we are AAA allows us to lend cheaply to our counterpart. That's the first answer, but I don't want to stop there. I would also like to add the fact that EIB provides a stamp of quality to the project finance. Why is it the case? Because contrary to commercial banks, EIB not only has bankers who are able to analyze the credit risk, but we also have economists, engineers, environment specialists, etc., people who can look at the project that we finance with a very deep focus and decide whether the projects are fully justified, whether they are sound. And this soundness analysis gives the project a very strong recognition from the market. It's a stamp of quality, and I would like to also insist on that. It's not only about cheap money, it is about cheap money, but it's much more than that. This is the last slide, I promise. I see you looking at me, and I will give the floor to the minister. How practically, let's try to be practical after this overview. How can you access EIB funding? Well, there is a first informal contact. It could be either you coming to us or us coming to you because we have heard about you in the newspaper or otherwise. And if we feel that there is the basis for a project, we start due diligence that will indeed cover these different dimensions of credit analysis, economic assessment, technical assessment, etc., etc. This can take some time because we go into the details to make sure that we only support the right project. After we have completed the due diligence phase, we go to a board, and that is when the project has been fully reviewed, and we ask the shareholders of the bank, the member states of the EU, board, can you please confirm that we can finance this project? Hopefully they say yes, because we try to be very sharp in our analysis. And then after that is the legal negotiation. We sign the contract, we disburse the money, and hopefully the project is fully implemented. That is in a nutshell how we operate. I hope I have not been too long, and I thank you for your attention. I'm available after the minister's speech to answer to any question you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre-Emmanuel, and thank you for keeping that succinct. It was excellent. But I said earlier that it's clear that Belgium is taking this opportunity of InvestEU very seriously. In fact, it's so serious that we are with the pleasure to be joined by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Belgium, Vincent Peteghem. So without further ado, Minister, because I know you're an extremely busy man, I'd like to hand the floor over to you for a few words.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, dear Mrs. Flores, dear Mr. De Rink, dear participants. 520 billion euros a year will be needed for the green transition. 270 billion in the coming years to stop our dependency from Russian fossil fuels. 200 billion to increase our national defense budgets. 500 billion to reconstruct Ukraine after the war. The amounts are staggering, but the priorities are clear. We all agree that we are living in unprecedented times. There is a war on our continent. We are struggling through an energy crisis while we have a green and digital transition in front of us. We all agree that we need to invest in order to face those challenges. But one important question remains, and it's an important question. Who is going to pay? Politicians like to discuss the different investment needs, but it takes real political courage to tackle the question, where will the money come from? And therefore, I'm glad to be here today. Regarding financing, there are two certainties. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Loans need to be repaid. And increased public spending puts a burden on our budgets and our future capacity to spend. So as governments, we need to be realistic. The public sector alone will not be able to finance all those challenges. Therefore, we need to mobilize private funds. And therefore, I'm glad to be here today at this launch of InvestEU in Belgium. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give some remarks regarding this important question, how to finance our investment needs. First of all, financing those challenges will require teamwork from both the EU institutions and the national governments, from both the public and the private sector. In Belgium and Europe, we definitely do not lack brilliant people with bright ideas that can solve the challenges we face. But in our current economic environment, it is not always easy to find financing, to find investors that want to take the risks. And therefore, as governments, we need to encourage those innovative ideas. Governments should not finance everything themselves, but should be there to mitigate the risks. We should provide guarantees or partial loans when banks or financial markets consider an idea too risky. So I very much welcome the InvestEU program, creating the much needed tools, the much needed funds to fund smart investment projects. This project and this program is an example of strong cooperation between the European Investment Bank and the Commission, and between the public and private sector. And let me give you an example close to my hometown, De Pinte. ArcelorMittal, the second largest steel producer in the world, recently announced a €1 billion investment for the production of green steel at its site in Ghent. This is a successful example of private investments being mobilized with direct public support from our Belgian and Flemish government and EU support through an important project of common European interest. Moreover, a €280 million loan has been given by the EIB and backed by the investment plan for Europe. This loan should help to fund the group's research and development program, creating more green solutions. But also IMEC, an important research center in the field of nanoelectronics and digital technology, located close by hereby in Leuven, will play a central role in Europe's ambition to become a world chips player. Its spin-offs are known worldwide and received funding from the Belgium Sovereign State Fund, FPIM, and the EIB. An example of such a spin-off is MeDiagnostics, the Belgian COVID-19 PCR test developer, which received €20 million loan from the EIB. Moreover, IMEC will be an important player in the European Chips Act that was recently presented by the Commission. With this European funding, IMEC will be able to create new and better pilot lines and further invest in its research capacity. And also the Belgian government is fully committed to activate private savings. In the aftermath of the COVID crisis, we created our transformation fund And this fund will invest in companies or specific funds that help the transition towards digitization, inclusion, sustainable mobility, and greening our economy. The federal government itself will invest 750 million euros. But we are just there for the early stage development projects. Most importantly, private financing should take the lead. We consciously decided to engage both small and large private investors because above all, the message should be, if you invest in this fund, you invest in Belgium's future. And moreover, as government, we aim to accelerate the energetic renovation of our public buildings. Therefore, we will develop a financial vehicle, the Design, Renovate, Finance and Maintain structure that will attract mostly private funding. Institutional investors will be able to co-invest in the renovation of our public buildings through energy performance contracts, a true example of a public-private collaboration. So all those initiatives and projects start from one common objective. Investing in the green and digital transition will make our economy future-proof. But one final element should not be forgotten. Future-proof economies also require fiscal sustainability. And due to the COVID support measures, the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis, debt levels have risen significantly. So governments need to return to budgetary prudency, the sooner the better. The Commission's country-specific recommendations are clear. Governments with higher debt levels, such as Belgium, should, for example, use the RRF funds to increase public investments, whilst returning to budgetary prudency. The RRF is indeed providing an important investment push. Belgium would initially get 5.9 billion euros. So in our recovery plan, we selected important green and digital projects linked with some much needed structural reforms. Nonetheless, it appears that 24% of our funds will be cut and redistributed to other member states. This is a challenge and risks undermining public support for the EU Recovery Fund. As Belgian authorities, we now have to decide either we cut important investment projects or we find alternative funding. But that would very likely put an additional burden on our public finances. At the same time, I'm a firm believer in the RRF model of dialogue between Commission and Member States. I see this as a template for securing productive investments in the framework of the revised European fiscal rules. So more than ever, with the current high debt levels, governments need to look into smart ways of investing. If you want to duly take into account our future debt sustainability, we also need to count on the private sector. So I'm glad we have all those different partners in the room that are willing to work together and take up this responsibility. I'm fully convinced that all together we can tackle the challenges we face, both the public and the private sector, both the EU and the national level. Only by combining those different forces, we can prepare our economies for the challenges in front of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think you've, without being here at the start, you actually pulled together many of the points that were made by Vice President Peeters and by Elena Flores regarding the importance of InvestEU, the importance of bringing in the private sector, getting innovative ideas, and also the potential synergies with the Resilience and Recovery Fund. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've decided to maybe go with the coffee break right now. We thought that might be a good idea. Please, Shelley, Pierre-Emmanuel and other colleagues are here for questions and queries on some of the stuff they presented. And of course, later on, We will have Yu Zhang because I think it's a very important presentation. He's the head of unit for life and science biotechnology, which I think, as we've heard some examples today, is one we really see that we want to put a lot of emphasis for the future. And then later we will move into the session regarding small and medium-sized enterprises and middle-sized companies. So can I ask you, make your way? There's delicious EIB coffee available. I think there's tea for those who can resist that. And we look forward to having you back here at 4:05 to resume. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Minister, for joining us. I have no idea where that's going. Oh, it's long. It's okay? Okay. I think we nearly have everybody back in their seats. Paul? If I can ask my EIF colleagues to also take their seats. Okay. Right, ladies and gentlemen. So clearly you really liked the coffee. There is also a delicious drink coming sooner rather than later. So if we can get started, you get to that piece earlier. Thank you, Paul. So, and as I said, we are very, very pleased at the level of interest shown by the Belgian government in InvestEU and in the opportunities in Belgium. We've now been joined by the Belgian permanent representative to the EU, Ambassador van der Voorde. So thank you very much for joining us. And you're just in time to hear a presentation from my colleague Yu Zhang, who wants to talk to us a bit more about the life and science biotech investments that will be possible under InvestEU. And then, as I said, we will move to the block on access to finance for small and medium-sized enterprises. So Yu Zhang, please.
Thanks a lot. Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be among you to present the venture debt activities of the EIB. So my name is Yu Zhang. I'm heading the life science and biotech activities, but today the presentation is on the whole venture debt activities. So as my colleague Pierre-Emmanuel kindly introduced, so we have at the bank the coverage of corporates, public entities, project finance, etc. And one of the product that we are very proud of is the venture debt. And Vice President Peeters has mentioned two words that I would like you to keep in mind for the venture debt is smaller companies and higher risk. So that's about the summary of what venture debt could be. So first of all, just a little bit of history to give you the background of what venture debt, where venture debt came from. So basically, about 10 years ago, while the world is coming out of the financial crisis, and then also from the sovereign crisis, we have noticed at EIB, but also at the Commission, that the small companies that are the very innovative ones, that are actually the pillars of our economy, were still suffering. The larger companies are actually getting back on the market, getting the liquidity they needed and the funding they needed. But the smaller companies were still struggling and also, which is bad for Europe, thinking to move elsewhere where liquidity is more generous. And the idea, together with the colleagues of the Commission, is to develop instruments. That's, for example, my colleagues from the EIF have also the coverage to finance the small and medium-sized companies. But at the EIB side, we wanted to also intervene in project directly. And that's how we started the venture debt activities back in, I would say, 2013, 2014. And actually, I'm very proud that one of the first test cases were in Belgium. It is EVS based in Liège. And then another one was Punch Powertrain based in Sint-Truiden. And but back then, probably if you, for the ones who knows Punch Powertrain, back then the company was actually in a much less, let's say, healthy state than now, since they were still struggling financially back then. And then little by little, we have developed the instruments first on the ECFIN, so together with the Commission, and then on the Juncker plan that Janka explained as well, and later on also on the European Guarantee Funds. But now, obviously, we are deploying these venture debt activities on the InvestEU mandates. Two things that's maybe is interesting for you to remember as well is on the venture debt, we are covering two types of investment activities. One is what we call the standards venture debt activities covering a quite large array of companies. As long as the company has innovative products, innovative solutions, we are covering the growth stage of these companies. And then the other side is directed by thematic topics. So these can be, for example, we had the infectious disease program that actually was very active during the COVID period. We have financed many COVID-related research programs under this infectious disease program, but obviously also thematics such as the green transition, decarbonization, etc. So these are the thematic programs that are covered under the venture debt activities as well. So a little bit about the activities itself and what sectors are mainly concerned. As I mentioned, we cover all the sectors, but obviously you have sectors that are more active in the scope than others. And as you can see on the pie charts on the slides, so we are covering the digital segment, so everything related to the digitalization of our economy. The engineering, which is basically everything related to the green transition in terms of activities, and then also the life science sector that is actually representing a very important part of our financing. In terms of companies, I'll come back a little bit on the next slide on this. So we are targeting the innovative companies. We're targeting companies that have innovative ideas, that are trying to develop that, and that are obviously in need of large investments in order to implement these ideas. And in terms of sector I mentioned, we are covering quite a broad array of sectors, and then obviously we're active throughout the whole year, and mainly the European Union. So what are the companies that we're targeting? So here we have an evolution of, let's say, the life cycle of a company. So from, let's say, the idea in a garage, to just picture it, to a mature company. So then the company obviously will go through the cycle of evolution and also in parallel go through the funding stages. So it can start with friends and families, with their own savings from the founders, and then angel investors, and then the start from VC investors, private equity, etc. So in terms of intervention by EIB in the venture debt segment, I would say the sweet spot is around the Series B's to C financing rounds. This helps us to have a smoother due diligence sessions with the companies. But on the other hand, our role, since we are financing with debt financing, our role is to help the company to grow. But obviously, the seed stage is led by the angel investors or the VC funds. So why is that good for the companies, for its funders, or for the shareholders? For the company, the venture debts, as I mentioned, we noticed that the companies are struggling to find the liquidity in order to bring their or deploy their ideas or their products onto the market. So here they need, I'm just using an example that is quite familiar for me, is for the biotech companies. They have an idea, they're developing a molecule, they need to go through, for example, the clinical trials. And the later you go in the clinical trials, the more it costs. So in our, let's say, activities, we are trying to help the companies to implement the most costly stages of their R&D. And that helps the companies to also have a peace of mind saying, okay, we have some liquidity in order to not be bothered all the time with funding rounds. For the funders, obviously, if you're a funder of a company that have put all his or her energy and savings over the last 10, 20 years, but it's good to know that there is an instrument that helps funding the company without diluting the shareholding of the funder, and also without taking control of how the company is managed or how the business plan is driven. And third, for the investors, obviously, since we are investing in, legally speaking, a debt instrument, it doesn't have the same return requirement as an equity investment. So there is a complementarity with the equity investment. Oops. So here we have an illustration of how this instrument works. So as I mentioned, legally speaking, we're talking about the debt financing. So it is not about taking stakes in the company. So we are granting, well, literally a loan to the company. However, we have some flexibilities. So in terms of return, the majority of the return part, so meaning what needs to be not only the principal that has to be paid, but also the additional remuneration of the financing will be pegged to the success of the underlying project. So if we are developing, again, a drug or a new way of generating energy, we will be looking at how successful and what success the project will generate. And then in that case, we will be taking a share of that success. Obviously, then if there is no success, most of the return is non-existent. In terms of sequence of payments, so from day one, once the finance contract is signed, we have a commitment, a full commitment of the amount, of the financing amount, and then the company can, according to the evolution of its business plan, draw the financing during quite long periods. Typically, it ranges from a few months to up to some exceptional cases to 3 years. And then from the drawdown of this financing, we will have the maturity periods that will start running until the end. So each tranche will be considered as a more or less independent line. So here a slide that is fairly similar to what Pierre-Emmanuel has mentioned as well. So how it works, well, obviously we will start with some initial contact, and then it goes through the whole, let's say, due diligence, approval, and contract negotiation period. Maybe just one word, this whole process lasts typically between 6 months and 9 months, so which is actually a long time, but then it also depends on how smooth the due diligence is, because sometimes we are discussing about the contents of the business plan, and then also how smooth the finance contract is, negotiation is. Sometimes it is very smooth, we agree immediately. Sometimes it takes actually quite a long time to reach an agreement. And then we have the monitoring phase once the investment is made. So here we can see a bit, it is not all the companies we have invested in, but just a sample. So we have under the venture debts, let's say, activities invested 4 billion euros across Europe for more than 160 very innovative small-sized companies already. And it is obviously growing nearly every day. In Belgium, actually, we are very active. So I think there were some examples about Universals, Meat Diagnostics mentioned, or iStar mentioned by the VP. Indeed, Belgium is a fertile ground for very innovative small-sized companies. So we're trying indeed to help those companies to finance their projects. Oops. So I think that's my last slide. It doesn't move anymore. So thank you very much, and happy to answer to some questions at the break.
Thank you, Zhang. Yeah, you were so into it you forgot it was near the end, but there's quite a lot of companies on that list. It's impressive. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think with your permission, we'll proceed into the next block, and then perhaps we can save some questions for at the end, if that's all right with you, unless someone has an urgent, burning question. Okay, well then now I'd like to move to block 2, which is access to finance for SMEs and medium-sized corporates. And I'm very pleased to hand the floor, first of all, to a colleague from the Commission, from DG Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, which is usually shortened to DG Grow, which is a little easier to say. So Astrid Bartels, if I can hand the floor to you to introduce regarding SMEs financing, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. The reason I'm standing in front of you is that within the Commission, we've sort of divided the competencies between the 4 different windows. And when it comes to the SME window under InvestEU, I'm the one chairing the internal Commission group. So I'll be giving you a little bit of an overview of what is now available under the InvestEU window in terms of products that are offered, and how does that link to what the Commission does from a policy perspective. So, policy framework. Actually, we already announced back in 2020 what it is that we intended to do with the SME window of InvestEU. On the 10th of March 2020, the Commission published a package of policies. There was the industrial policy strategy, but also the SME strategy for a sustainable and digital Europe. And I think the title already gives away what it is that we want to do with the SME window. Namely, we want to foster transactions and help SMEs to transition towards a more sustainable and digital way of doing business. But that's not the only focus that we are looking after under the SME window. There are other policy areas that we want to particularly push. For instance, something that is totally new. There's going to be emphasis put on gender smart financing. It's also something that was already mentioned previously by the EIB. They're going to be looking at technical assistance in that area. So we're trying to push or put the different building blocks here together. Generally, also what we want to achieve is building a much more integrated European capital market, specifically on the equity side. We know that financial markets are very much fragmented along national lines, and we really would like to see a much bigger integration, cross-border transaction happening. And in the SME strategy, we already announced that actually the InvestEU SME window would be our main policy tool, because basically there is no other Commission program available with funding that would help us to implement it. Then, well, the SME strategy was actually published on a Wednesday, and on Friday we all learned we would go into lockdown due to COVID, right? So everything changed, the whole context. That also gave the Commission time for pause, and we had to think, what do we want to do with it? What should we do with our strategies? So actually, a little bit more than a year later, the Commission updated or published an updated industrial strategy. But in as far as the SME strategy was concerned, we said we strongly stand by what we published a year ago. That SME strategy is more valid than ever. The only thing that was pointed out at that point in time is that it would need an additional push, namely when it comes to solvency of SMEs. Some of you may remember there was a big debate when the Commission made a proposal for InvestEU to possibly also add a big solvency tool. Politically, it was decided against it, but the co-legislators said within InvestEU, specifically the SME window, one should implement a solvency tool, mainly targeted at those SMEs that had taken on a lot of debt because they benefited from public support measures. In the forms of loans. And so we know that there are quite a lot of SMEs that have a skewed balance sheet structure, so way too much debt, which doesn't really allow them to now go and make further investments. So this is what we have to address as well. In terms of implementation, you already heard it, the EIF, as the subsidiary of the EIB, is the main implementing partner for everything that's being done under the SME window in terms of products, on the debt as well as on the equity side. We've concluded our mandate with the EIF, and the EIF now, in order to put the products into the market, has published calls for expression of interest, because it's not the EIF who will finance an individual SMEs. On the SME side, contrary to what the EIB does, EIB finances companies directly, the EIF never finances a company directly. They always work through financial intermediaries across the EU that become so-called financial intermediaries, right? So the EIF counter guarantees them, or they make investments into the equity funds. The EIF can work with a broad array of financial intermediaries, depending on whether it's a debt or an equity product, such as, general commercial banks, promotional national institutions, guarantee society, microfinance institutions, leasing companies, alternative providers of finance, you name it. And so it's then those financial intermediaries that will actually provide the financing directly to the SMEs. The advantage such a long implementation modus has is the following. The small businesses can actually approach someone in their own jurisdiction, in their own legal context, and actually in their local language, which is very important, while the EIB usually tends to work in English only, so it's not always accessible to everyone. So what have we agreed with the EIF? What's out there? For what do we have public calls for expression of interest? Well, first of all, we've negotiated one broad guarantee facility where the EIF will now counter guarantee a portfolio of new financing transactions that such financial intermediaries have to build up. And we've structured it around our big policy priorities. So here, with regard to sustainability, that is actually something really brand new. We never had a dedicated guarantee facility in the previous programming period that would allow to just build up a new portfolio of sustainability transactions. In order to be eligible for finance, we've of course developed together with the EIF, and they've market tested it, so-called eligibility criteria that banks have to test at the time when they provide the financing. You may now want to ask the question, so sustainable finance, that's the taxonomy at EU level. What's the link between taxonomy and that guarantee facility? And here would say that the financing under the sustainability guarantee is not going to be taxonomy aligned, but I would really call it taxonomy inspired. And what do I mean by it? I mean, if you're familiar with the taxonomy, it's very detailed. You have the significant contribution criteria, you have the do no significant harm criteria, the minimum social safeguards. So it's actually quite complex to see whether a particular financing transaction is taxonomy aligned or not. In the area of SME finance, which is a volume business, and very often you deal with very, very small transactions, transposing that is just not doable. No one in the market would actually like to have a guarantee if the EIF came with a long list of obligations. So what we did is we looked at the significant contribution criteria, looked at in which areas would SMEs actually engage, and then created together with the EIF simplified eligibility criteria on that. Then the second part we have is the Innovation and Digitalization Guarantee Facility. And here, we're building on past experience. You've heard the name ECFIN before, so financial instruments that were put into practice by EIB, EIF under the last programming period under the Horizon 2020 program. So we've built on that experience. The Innovation and Digitalization is just a successor guarantee facility to it was called ECFIN SMEC guarantee facility. We've also built on the same eligibility criteria here. Then we have the guarantee facility for the culture and creative sector. Again, that is a continuation of something that existed under the media program previously. And then last but not least, we have the SME competitiveness guarantee, which in a way is a successor to the COSME guarantee facility that we had in the previous programming period. But here, as you can see on the slide, it does include the solvency support instrument. So how does that function? I mean, generally, the objective of the SME Competitiveness Guarantee Facility is to help financial intermediaries finance those transactions that they otherwise really wouldn't touch because of risk. So how do you translate a lofty policy objective in something on the ground? Well, usually in a financial intermediary, when applying for a counter guarantee, has to show the EIF what their, let's say, risk comfort zone is. What type of transactions do they do? And to give a simplified example, very often you will not find a commercial bank that will have a dedicated financing offer for startups, companies in the first 5 years of existence who hardly have a track record, no collateral. So here, if an SME, if a bank comes and said, because of the EU guarantee, I'm willing to build up a new portfolio solely composed of startup transactions, they will be able to get the guarantee. The same thinking we applied then to this new solvency instrument. In order to make the solvency instrument really work and achieve its purpose, what we needed to do is find a way how SMEs can rearrange their balance sheet. I mean, just replacing the existing short-term facilities they had from government support programs by longer-term durations wasn't really going to cut it. We knew that. So what we really needed were subordinated loans. So the solvency support instrument is really meant for those banks or financial institutions who are willing to build up a new portfolio exclusively consisting of subordinated loans to those SMEs that have really suffered due to COVID. So the eligibility criteria is rather simple. We say the company must have been affected by the COVID crisis to be demonstrated through a reduction in turnover. So it works for the smallest of companies. You just look at the P&L 2019 and P&L 2020, and if there was a reduction, they are basically in the area of the eligibility. If they now have a lot of short-term loans, then the bank can actually refinance the existing short-term loans in a longer-term subordinated loan. Yeah, minimum duration of the subordinated loan here has to be 3 years. So this is really a novelty that we have put here. And then my last slide. Now I'm going to move over to the equity side. You may know that the EIF is the largest European fund of funds. They invest into venture capital funds. And here, the Commission, we have given them a rather large mandate. If you look at the resources we gave them together with what the EIF from EIF own resources, EIB Group resources will invest is roughly 6 billion. What we have done to really get to this number, we've actually bundled resources. So we've taken resources from the SME window as well as from the RID window. And contrary to what we did in the past, where we told the EIF, go invest in early stage funds or go and invest in later stage funds, we've become a lot more policy pronounced this time around. Yeah, so we've really broken it up. The EIF tends to call it the verticals here, if you ever hear them talk. So there's a clear focus on those funds that invest in enabling sectors and technologies, where you do have life science funds in there, but also space, defense for the first time, clearly identified, industrial technologies, semiconductor, things that fall within the realm of the CHIPS Act that was announced. Then there's a next group, anything that has to do with greening of the economy, the climate and environmental solutions, where you have a broad focus on mobility, transport, and also decarbonization in general. Then you have the whole pack around digital solutions. And again, here it's rather pronounced what we're looking for in terms of investment strategies of those funds. So AI, blockchain, distributed ledger technology, cybersecurity, quantum computing. CCI stands for the culture and creative sector. So it's not carbon capture storage, don't get that wrong. But also for the first time, we're really saying, look, if you find funds investing in education tech or in other digital areas. And then last but not least, we have the whole block that relates more to the focus on getting a more integrated European capital market. So the capital markets union objectives. Here, the EIF is being tasked to invest into those funds that do invest really cross-border. And we have quite a lot of them, and more are coming on stream. In that particular box, we also have the EIF support to debt and hybrid funds. So that's the type of funds that started emerging after the financial crisis in Europe. Previously, we didn't really have great alternatives to pure bank finance, which European SMEs are very dependent on. 90% of all their financing, if they use external finance, comes through the banking sector, contrary to, for instance, the US. And here, debt funds really provide a very interesting alternative, because even though the funds themselves are financed by investors and not by savings, for instance, they will use these proceeds to then actually invest debt into those companies. And that can be senior debt loans, but it can also be very bespoke financing transactions, which then tend to be a little bit bigger in nature, so usually starting at €1 million+. What is also important to know is that we've given the EIF, for the implementation of this mandate, what we call our horizontal policy objectives. And here, this is where the gender smart comes into focus, because if you're familiar with statistics, about 1% of VC capital goes to female founders. Not a great number if we look at how many females we have in the general population. There have been quite a lot of studies around it, and it's a topic that's catching on. Also with, national governments are looking at it. And we believe that the key to unlocking more money for female founders is actually with the funds or the structures that are taking the investment decisions. So we've clearly decided, in order to sort of count an investment as a gender-smart investment, the fund itself has to comply with certain criteria, and that has to do with how is the management team of the fund made up, what does the investment team look like, so the people in decision-making powers, there needs to be a certain quota of women in there, in the investment committees, in the senior management team, between 30 and 40%. And we've actually given the EIF a target in terms of how many of the overall investments out of these 6 billion they're going to be making gender smart. And in terms of the number of funds they invest in, we would like to see that 25% of all of those funds comply with the gender smart criteria. So it's a rather high target, and we really hope we can make the push that these things happen until end of 2027. Another topic we're looking into is making sure that more financing flows to those regions in Europe that are usually underrepresented. Those are the ones that we call the moderate and emerging innovator countries. So, it's basically Central Eastern Europe and Southern Europe. Then we have a push for Escala. You see here, what is Escala? That's actually a new risk-sharing structure that the EIF started testing already under FC. Normally, when the EIF makes an investment, they do it pari passu with the other private investors into a fund, or the other public investors. Under Escala, for the first time, they are deviating from the pari passu approach, and they're moving into asymmetric risk sharing. But not in the sense that, again, it's the public absorbing all the risk and letting the private go with all the upside. No, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. What happens is that the whole idea emerged around the falling star. We have funds in Europe that are generally too small. So if a fund manager has a nice portfolio, has picked his 12 to 15 portfolio companies, has identified his 5, 6 winners, usually by the time they can really grow and push these companies, they're out of resources in their fund. And then they're forced to sell out early. And in the worst case, those portfolio companies will then subsequently be financed by even non-European investors, not something that we particularly like from a policy perspective. So the idea was to give those fund managers an opportunity to raise additional funding through a side vehicle. And this side fund, the whole purpose should be to actually use the additional resources to just power the winners. So, the upside potential should really be there. And the side vehicle should be structured such that it's not pari passu, but it's a junior and a senior piece. And the senior piece, for once, is going to be the public. These are the Escala shares. And the junior piece should be the other private investors from the fund. And what do the private investors get in terms for taking the extra risk, well, they get a lot of the upside because the escalars, for being in the senior tranche, they will do with just earning a hurdle rate of a couple percentage points. But if the fund then really outperforms and these companies do really well, and that's the intention, then the private investors will be able to significantly participate from the upside. And so this is something that we want the EIF to test more broadly. So within this overall mandate, whenever the EIF sees an applicant coming and saying, you know, my strategy is, I don't know, I want to do life science, but I really want to focus on the growth stage, the EIF will be asking these applicants, well, would you also be interested in, you know, rather than a pari passu investment from us, working in a different risk-sharing structure through Escalar? Again, we really would like to push this, and we hope that this will, in the long run, attract much more private capital into equity finance in Europe. And last but not least, we want to foster IPOs. So for the first time ever, EIF can also invest into those funds that then subsequently invest at SMEs, not only while they're all only private, but also helping them to go public. And with that, I close. Thank you.
Astrid, thank you very much. I mean, that's given us an extremely good overview of the policy environment in which the assistance for SMEs will be given, and also how the, if you like, the approach has been both tweaked and in some cases really innovated to reach the new challenges that we face. And now I would like to hand the floor to my colleagues from the European Investment Fund, which, as Astrid mentioned, is a dedicated structure under the EIB Group, which focuses on risk financing for SMEs, working through a range of partners and intermediaries. And so I'm going to ask Nicolas de la Vallée-Poussin and Paul Samsonov to come and tell us how you're going to achieve what Astrid just set out.
Hi, and thank you very much. As I said, I work for the European, as was introduced, I work for the European Investment Fund out of Luxembourg, and it's also been pointed out to me that I stand between you and a drink, so I shall try to be as succinct as I possibly can. So we've been given a rather large mandate, and I'm going to talk through the basics of InvestEU. I'm helped in my desire to go fast by the fact that a lot of what I'm going to present has been covered in various previous presentations, and so I hope you'll excuse me if some of the slides go by quite fast. So, InvestEU. We've been given about, or InvestEU is about, it's not just us, InvestEU is 26.2 billion, give or take, and we're trying to mobilize about 372 billion in investments across the policy windows that I will not describe because you've seen them before. The goal being to finance investment, innovation, and job creation in Europe in a window of time that goes up to 2027. We've also pointed out before that it's a simplification in some ways of previous products. It gathers together a number of different financial instruments, policy objectives, but also products that we've designed in the past, and it brings them together into a single fund. And the European Investment Bank, which you see combining the EIF and the EIB here, has about 3/4 of all of the funds from InvestEU. The EIF does the intermediated products with approximately 11 billion to spend. Those 11 billion are split between guarantees and equity. Guarantees, we take portfolios of loans, and we guarantee those portfolios vis-a-vis the intermediaries that have lent that money in order to encourage further investment in riskier enterprises, scale-ups, areas they might not have invested in otherwise, in order to encourage them to support companies that are recovering from COVID or that have investments in policy areas that are of interest to the European Commission. Under equity, it's a similar concept. We're policy-focused. InvestEU is very thematic in its approach. And here we are a fund of funds, and we invest in investment funds across Europe that are aligned with the policy objectives that have been handed to us and the structures that have been given to us under the guarantee agreement. We cover all of the sectors that were mentioned by Astrid earlier, which is why I'm, again, not going to read them out. And we also cover funds at different stages. So we start all the way down at technology transfer, but then VC and private equity, people supporting mid-caps, people supporting smaller companies, and people supporting scale-ups as well now. So there's a broad range. The reach and impact of InvestEU, of our part of InvestEU, we're aiming to take the funds that we've been given and we try to entrain or catalyze or draw in further private funds with an objective to hit a 13 times effect, a multiplier of 13. So for every euro that we invest, we're trying to create a 13 euro impact at the final SME level. InvestEU's products split between equity and guarantees. Slightly more on the guarantee side. This is how they break down for us. And under the equity products, I will let Paul describe the guarantee products, we have three major silos. We have the joint equity product, which is broken down into enabling sectors, climate and environmental solutions, digital and cultural and creative services, and the capital markets union product. And you see the rough distribution there. And we have the climate and infrastructure funds product and the social impact product. Now, we've heard a lot about it, but it's worth drawing attention to the capacity building and advisory hub. So we are helping companies, or sorry, helping funds to apply to us. We're helping people develop the expertise necessary to take the money. We're helping people develop the capacity to spend the money that we're offering and to receive investment from us. And there's an enormous amount of work going on, not necessarily from my part of the EIB Group, but an enormous amount of effort going on to help companies and to help funds use this money and use this support. I'll slow down a bit. So what's the equity product? The European Investment Fund has been financing SMEs via its intermediated products for a very long time. And as an InvestEU implementing partner, as the largest InvestEU implementing partner, we have 6.5 billion to deploy to the market under the equity product. There are policy priorities that govern and structure how that money will be spent. This slide takes the main equity product and adds to it the social impact product and explains the silos or the thematic strategies, as we call them online and in our call for expression of interest, that the equity product supports. And if a company or if a fund applies to us for support, it is going to apply across one or two of these because it is looking for support for investments in target areas that fall under these. And those target areas were explained in an earlier slide and in Astrid's presentation. So under enabling sectors, you might have life sciences. Under digital and CCS, you have artificial intelligence, blockchain technologies, and so on. You can think of these as the verticals, as the silos in which the money resides and to which people must apply, or that we must assign funds to these categories in order to deploy money to them. Each of them has a specific policy priority, a specific policy objective that it adheres to. And again, not wanting to repeat too much and delay the next presentation, but it's worth going over it very briefly. So the Capital Markets Union, it's about diversification of sources of finance. It's about strengthening the ability to scale up enterprises. It's about providing a more unified capital market in Europe. Enabling sectors is very much about the strategic autonomy of the European Union in terms of the target areas that fall underneath it. We're looking at things like space. There's also defense in there, but there's also things like life sciences and semiconductors. Climate and environmental solutions, not to be confused with my next product, which will be the climate and infrastructure funds product, but also providing support for things like mobility. The target areas were in Astrid's presentation, and I don't want to spend time on them, but it's a focused product on climate and environmental solutions that supports funds helping SMEs rather than infrastructure funds drive investment into these areas. Digital and CCS, very much driven towards our strategic autonomy in the digital sphere, so artificial intelligence, quantum computing, things like that. And then the social impact is a separate product. You saw it as a separate silo in the earlier slide with the different bar charts. And this is really looking at providing a better environment, a better investment environment for social impact funds, which is a new product for the European Investment Fund and something that we're very proud to support. There are what we think of as our horizontal objectives, or the transversal goals, and these were again touched on by Astrid, and these are not conditions of investment. They are objectives that we have, largely agreed with the European Commission, in order to support what we think are critical areas of improvement within the European financial ecosystem. The SKLR mechanism, which Astrid went to in detail, is really to support scale-ups, or to support funds that will support scale-ups, and to provide that additional money and that additional firepower when they know who their winners are, and they need the ability to support those at the time. And it allows us to do something we've never done before the SKLR product, which is accept a different risk structure than pari passu. The IPO product is focusing much more on support for funds that are helping companies go to public markets. So funds that have crossover strategies, funds that are looking at pre, at, or to a certain extent post-IPO portfolio companies in order to enhance that aspect of the scale-up argument, in order to help the European market develop a greater ability to bring companies to market. And that's because when a company is seeking to go to market, it has this option of going abroad and of going outside the EU, and we're trying to support our funds in keeping these key scale-up companies within the European Union. What we've called cohesion on this slide is the moderate and emerging innovator countries, so countries where we think extra effort needs to be made in order to support the development of financing ecosystems and fund ecosystems to help SMEs grow. And we have a strong focus on those, and I know from knowing the data that there's a strong pipeline of those. And there's an equally strong pipeline in the gender smart criteria. So we have a strong pipeline of funds that match what we call the gender smart criteria. There's 3 of them. You can find them on our website, but generally speaking, it is about female leadership at the fund level in order to support the development of funds that will in turn, according to the research and according to our beliefs, improve the support for female-led SMEs in turn. The middle bar of the 3, if you remember, was climate and infrastructure funds. This is a separate product. It requires a dedicated application on our website, and we have a 3.5 billion budget dedicated to green project finance across the EU. It is not for nascent technologies being developed by an SME. This is not venture capital. This is for funds that are operational in backbone infrastructure and industrial ecosystems. So we're looking at the clean energy transition, sustainable transport, and environment and resources. And this is a major and separate product that is being pushed under the InvestEU banner. Now, just before I hand over to Paul, all of this information, which I've pretty much raced through because there's a binary choice between doing it extremely fast or taking a lot of time, it's available on our website. A lot of work has gone into presenting the call for expression of interest in a way that is approachable and understandable. And to the extent that you are in contact with financial intermediaries that may be eligible for this, we very much encourage people to explore that and to reach out to us in order for us to be able to help them apply or determine what the best way to apply to the EIF would be for these funds. So thank you for your time, and I will hand over to Paul.
Okay, I'm going to try to be even quicker and say, what do we do at EIF in terms of guarantees? Yeah, very good. Okay, so we provide guarantees to banks, funds, financial institutions, lenders in general. We have 2 types of guarantees, capped and uncapped. Astrid mentioned it earlier. A cap guarantee means that I will guarantee you and pay you up to a certain amount. An uncapped means that I will pay you 50 cents on every euro of loss. If you are a lender and you lend 100, on any euro of loss you have on your portfolio, I will pay you 50 cents. If you have a cap guarantee, I will pay you the same 50 cents up to a certain amount. If the cap is 25, it means that potentially I can pay you up to 12.5%. In both cases, I'm sharing the first losses with the lender. And the difference is mainly on the unexpected loss and the senior part, because at some point I will not share and I will not pay the losses. If I'm a bank, I need to allocate capital as well on my portfolio. So there will be key differences on whether I want to use a cap or uncapped guarantees. Clearly, the uncapped guarantee is providing me a full capital relief. If I am a small bank, I need an uncapped guarantee to release capital. If I'm an advanced and a big bank, if I'm the ING, the KBC, or a big national bank, I will be able anyway to recognize capital benefit, even if I'm using the cap guarantee, because I will be able to calculate the amount of capital I need to cover the senior risk. In terms of leverage, before we thought about the commission budget, whenever an SME, let's say, is buying a machine for 120, 130, the SME is calling the bank and asking the bank for 100. Besides that, we may guarantee the bank for 50, for half of the amount. And if we guarantee half of the amount, we will ask, or we will use the backing and the budget of the commission to cover ourselves. As Pierre-Emmanuel mentioned earlier, we also need to manage our AAA, we need to manage our risk, therefore we will leverage on the commission budget. That means that if a company is spending 130, asking the bank 100, I guarantee 50, I will ask 10 to the commission. So I'm already leveraging 13 times the money of the commission in order to be able to benefit to as many SMEs as possible with the smallest possible budget from the commission. We are a guarantee institution, so we will guarantee the banks or the lenders. We are not here to ensure the financing of an SME. We have a lot of SMEs calling us and telling us, how come I'm calling my banks, they're not lending me money, they're not deploying efficiently the EU budget. The idea is that we will align with the bank. If a bank is not willing to risk 1 million, the bank will not be willing to lose or to risk 500K. So the idea for us is not to take the risk out of the bank or out of the lender, but it's just to give more flexibility to the lender so that they can maybe lend more, maybe lend longer, maybe lend slightly riskier. But we are a risk mitigator. It's key for us to ensure alignment of interest between us and the banks. We are not a collateral. So if you are a bank or a lender, you cannot say, I'm going to use half of the amount, I'm gonna cover it with the building and half of it with EIF or EIB Group. Otherwise, we would not be aligned. We would be taking a risk, and the lender would only be securing his margin without any risk. So we are a guarantor. We risk and we guarantee the loss. We don't guarantee the full amount. We are not a collateral. The idea now is for us to guarantee and to push banks and funds into lending more towards those sectors that are key for the Commission. It was mentioned before, innovation, sustainability, cultural and creative sector, microfinance. We have 5 blocks that will be highlighted here. In each of the first 4 blocks, which are SME competitiveness, sustainability, innovation, and cultural creative sector, we can deploy either cap or uncapped guarantees. The guarantee, therefore, can go up to 50 or 70%, up to 80 in some cases. And we have a cap rate to define if the guarantee is capped. So as you see, there is a full matrix of possible guarantees. We will need to deploy the Commission budget in all these different policy objectives with different type of guarantees, capped or uncapped, and trying as well also to follow the GDP size of the different countries to ensure that everybody will have access to those funds. We can see that we will target those lenders who are lending to SMEs, small mid-cap, natural person as well, and housing association for those policies that are related to sustainability. Maximum amount is 7.5 million per financing, meaning that in theory we could lose up to 3,075,000 on our hand if we guarantee 50%. There will be a minimum maturity for those eligible loans that is 12 months. The maximum maturity, we have a maximum maturity for our guarantee that will be the length of our contract. So usually 12 years after the end of the availability period we give to our intermediaries. So let's say all in 15 years. In exchange for our guarantee, what we want is the bank or the lender to provide some benefit as well to the SME. We give more flexibility to the bank by giving a guarantee that will cost less than the cost of risk. If a company is good, a bank has no interest in paying us a fee that is more expensive than the risk they perceive for that lending. So they need, in order for it to be beneficial for the bank, they need to give us and ask us to guarantee those risky loans. So we should lose more money than what we receive. We are here to help the banks. We are not here to make money. We are not a for-profit institution. We will therefore try to help the banks, and in exchange, what we want is not the bank to make the same benefit. If the bank or the lender is halving his risk and halving his capital consumption, it also needs to slightly reduce its profit, not to just double its ROE and just make more money himself. If they need to demonstrate that they will take more risk, that they will accept less collateral, that potentially the coupon will be reduced. And by reducing the coupon, the bank or the lender will still be more effective in its usage of capital. If it's a bank, because they will allocate half of the capital they would have used if they select a 50% guarantee, but they will make more than half the money they would have theoretically. So they will still improve their return on equity. If it's a fund, the same, we will also ask the funds to reduce slightly the level of their coupon. Slightly, when I say slightly, I mean it needs to be commensurate with the level of risk they will take. But the fund should be able to propose to their investors as well an improved Sharpe ratio meaning the risk return, so that funds can go to the investors and propose a more attractive fund by saying that thanks to the support of the Commission and the involvement and the usage of the EIF guarantee, they'll be able to have a better yield return, much less risk and a little bit less return. So the idea is to try to, beside supporting banks, to also try to attract private money and to support lenders, funds, and other regional institutions. And I'm not going into all the details of what are the criteria to be eligible, or what are the eligibility criteria for the SME competitiveness, sustainability, innovation, cultural, microfinance, and skill education. I think we are available to discuss it bilaterally. The idea is to support the green transition, the digital transition. Microfinance talks by itself. Cultural is the same, all the financing of the cultural activity. And SME competitiveness, which is the ex-COSME, whereby we want to support those who are taking more risk, whatever the sector. There is an application process for banks or funds. We guarantee banks. We can also guarantee funds, not only invest in funds. The idea is to get in touch with us. We will discuss bilaterally what makes more sense for you, whether it makes more sense to use an uncapped guarantee or a capped guarantee, given the cost. The cost is different. It's cheaper to have a cap guarantee because it doesn't involve the usage of EIB Group balance sheet. In a sense, we only use the budget from the Commission. But it will depend on the type of portfolio you want to build, how granular your portfolio will be. If you have a very selective portfolio with just several lines, a cap guarantee may not make sense because potentially the second or third default, you will not be paid. While on a non-cap guarantee, it would be more appropriate for selective funds. If you have a very granular portfolio, then a cap guarantee can be very efficient because it will protect you while being much cheaper. Same apply to the type of a policy you want to pursue, and then we would discuss with you as well what is the best pocket to tap in. Obviously, we have way less money today than what we had under EGF. That was a bit of a blank carpet guarantee for the whole economy. So we need to shrink a lot our activity and be much more selective in identifying those right intermediaries and the right portfolio to guarantee. So very bilateral, but you can still exchange, and we will send you all the different details on the different guarantees and to see what fits you best. The deployment will be until the end of 2027, so we have a lot of time. Now we will try to start strongly and deploy as much as we can in the early years, and hopefully the Commission will give us more money so we can continue on a larger scale as we have done it over the last years with the successful deployment of InvestEU and EGF. That's it, and I'm happy to answer any question bilaterally. And now the floor is for the bar. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks a lot. Okay, I think we've thrown a lot of information at you this afternoon. I understand my colleagues here at the bank who have been preparing this event will put together a package of materials so that you will have information on what was presented today. We need to check with some of the presenters to make sure that's okay, but we will, in the next few days, you will get a package of materials going through all the various elements that you heard today. Can I ask if anyone has a specific question that you would like to raise now while we have a chance? Or we have tested your absorption capacity, but okay. Well, before I open the bar, and as an Irish person, that's something I'd like to do. I would like to say, first of all, thank you very much for your sticking power, for absorbing that, for your interest in InvestEU and the opportunities it presents to the public and private sector here in Belgium. Very much thanks to the Belgian government, which came, as you saw, at a very senior level here to show their support for this. And then, of course, I have to thank our colleagues in the Commission, our key partners on this, who, as you saw, gave some excellent detailed presentations and have set us some targets to achieve, and also my colleagues in both EIB and EIF who prepared very detailed presentations and who, over a drink, will be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Can I also recommend you to the websites of all things? You were given the website for InvestEU. If you simply Google InvestEU, you'll find all the relevant websites, but then you can go into whether it's your interest is on public sector investment or whether it's on SMEs and it's the European Investment Fund, etc. I would encourage you to go there. So now, it is with the greatest of pleasure. Thank you to colleagues who organised this actually here at the Brussels office. They're always forgotten who put a lot of effort into this. And now, with pleasure, they too, along with you, deserve a drink at the bar. Thank you very much.